I've read an article where you've written how while the economics profession has incorporated some of the insights from behavioral psychologists, that hasn't filtered down to the undergraduate textbook level. That we're still teaching in our introductory economics courses that the economic agent is rational and selfish and his or her tastes never change. I was wondering if you could comment on your ideas for how we need to change the way economics is taught to college students.
Well, I would hope, I think there is a very good reason for, the textbooks being structured the way they are. That is that if where you're going basically is things like prospect theory or equilibrium or notions of equilibrium and so on, then keeping things simple and saying that, assuming that people exploit all the opportunities available to them, will get you there. And introducing a lot of complexities just makes it more difficult to get there. I would really hope for the development of a special chapter. It's not about human nature and about social science. And, for higher level, it's not good, I think, for every student, but for higher level students, I think that a discussion of assumptions would be very useful. And what I mean by this is, it's very clear when you see behavioral economists in action, they need those assumptions. So they haven't given up on the assumption of rationality because they can't work without it. What they do is they tweak it. They tweak it, they weaken it locally, but they basically keep the machinery of economics because they can't do the mathematics without that machinery.
Right.
And that, if people could be taught that topic, and in some universities I think they could be taught, then I think they might be better able to distinguish the assumption of rationality as a methodological tool from the assumption of rationality as sort of a religion, and which I think in the past the two have often been very confused.
Do you think economics could ever exchange tractability for practicality?
Well, to some extent, this is happening. I think theories from behavioral economics are having an impact and are being recognized, and certainly the breadth of topics that are recognized as legitimate topics for economists, including well-being, a topic in which I'm interested these days, is certainly increasing. So, I would think actually, many people say that economics is a very conservative discipline. And when we began, my colleague Amos Tversky and I began interacting with economics about 30 years ago, it appeared to us that the discipline was very conservative. But in fact, I would say that the speed with which behavioral economics has been integrated as part of economics show that the discipline is not all that conservative. This is, in the broad perspective, if opinions can change about what is respectable within a decade or two, and this is what happened, then this discipline is not nearly as frozen as many people think it is.
Okay, so there's hope for economics after all. Well, following up on that issue, pretty much all economists got it wrong about the current economic crisis. And I was wondering if you could suggest maybe the main lesson economists have to learn from this current economic crisis and whether or not it was avoidable.
Well, I'm convinced that the odd thing about the crisis, I think, is that in a way, thinking from the perspective of somebody who's I'm not an economist, I'm not a behavioral economist, but I know enough of the way my friends, behavioral economists, think. The input of behavioral economics in understanding the crisis is really fairly minor in my view, and it's restricted to the, to the bottom level. I mean, it's restricted to the people buying mortgages that they cannot afford, people who need protection and are not protected by the system. Beyond that, within the financial system, you get rationality and greed operating in an unregulated way, And the very striking thing, from my perspective, I found it actually very moving, was Alan Greenspan's appearance before Congress, which has been widely commented on, where he admitted that his framework was wrong, and he said you can't work without a framework, but then he explained his framework, and he was saying basically that he thought that banks would work in their own self-interest. And it struck me that this idea of firms being like individuals is, in a way, economics already has the tools with agency theory and with a variety of other tools, to understand that this doesn't work. So why agency theory was not applied?
Okay.
Which everybody knows, is a mystery. Then there are, I think, lessons to be learned about forecasting. Very significant lessons, and I think some of them are fairly practical. I mean, there are things that could be done to improve forecasting that I think should be done.